Chapter 16 of the Golden Book of Springfield by Vachel Lindsay. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 16 The Return of Senator Joseph Bartholdi Michael from the World Government to Springfield. His converse of high import with a Japanese elder statesman who is a commissioner to our World's Fair. July 14th, 2018. The regular session of the World Senate has ended, and all the talk in the coffee houses is of the imminent return of Joseph Bartholdi Michael II, namesake of the high dandy of 100 years ago, himself a reversion to tribes still further, in that he is a replica of the Iron Gentleman, except that he has a hotter temper in old age, which makes him a most tigerish fighter in the World Senate. Today, being the Iron Gentleman's birthday, is a family festival with the Michaels, and in the very early morning, before there are any passers-by, the leading representatives of the family are hand in hand in silence around the original forge of the Iron Gentleman for a little while. The bellows is blowing and the fire is high, and there is a beginning of a blade in the flame, for they remember that he has said, "I will return to you only in the leaping flame of the forge fire." Then they repeat the Lord's Prayer and disperse, leaving, according to custom, one man to finish the blade at his leisure. In this case, Joseph Bartholdi Michael III. Saint Friend, the giver of bread, has told me that the Michaels in general have old-fashioned Bible reading in their homes, with old hymns and family prayers every morning or evening, no matter what pet heresies may be running through the tribe. Not many of them accept the formally designed altars of Joseph Bartholdi Michael III. They have left here hammering a blade, unless they are direct fanatical converts to the flower religion. This evening, I find myself one of a party in the library of Saint Friend. We have been given an uplifting welcome by the saint and the Tibetan boy. Joseph Bartholdi Michael III, the non-entity whose fortunes seem always thrust upon me, is of the party. Black Hawk Boone is there. Our special guest is Sake Shioya, one of the elder statesmen of Japan and in America, because he is head of the Department of Asiatic Art in the World's Fair of the University of Springfield. At home, when not in the Japanese cabinet, he is Professor Sake Shioya of the Doshisha University of Japan, and brother of Nataro Shioya, the leading Japanese representative in the Senate of the World Government. For a lifetime, the brothers have shouted through Japan, "We will strike off the head of the Singaporean snake with the sword of the samurai." Saint Friend passes round the cigars and, himself, sticks to his corncob pipe. Perhaps it is because we are under the portrait of Alexander Campbell. Our talk turns to religious controversy. Saint Friend says, "The world over, Jew, Catholic, Protestant used to hate each other to the point of slaughter, though all spoke the name of Abraham and several other patriarchs with the same reverence, and invoked Abraham's tribal God. Now the Marxians of the world revere Marx and Hegel as these others did Abraham and Jehovah. But the only way to keep them from cutting each other's throats is for the world government to stand between them." Indeed, "It is true," confirmed Shioya. "The purple flag Marxians of Japan, the yellow flag Marxians of China, the white flags of Tibet, the black flags of Russia, the red flags of Central Europe, the gray flags of America, all conspire against one another, with at least 5 times 5, which is 25/8 in all to be mathematical. Yet they all read the same Marx to tatters. When the yellow flag Marxians of China agree among themselves sufficiently to fall upon the purples of Japan, a thing we are momently expecting, the world government will have a stern police duty, especially since both sides are being urged on by Singapore." Samiri Shioya, that austere old man, continues, saying that which he can more gracefully say than any of the rest of us. "Instead of a world of 3 classes, special privileged, middle class, and peasantry, as these Marxians think it to be, it is, from my brother's standpoint and my own, a globe whose seas and continents are spread with 50 to 100 antagonistic races, mutually repellent. These 50 to 100 races die thoroughly with the dye of race mysticism any economic teaching they take up. So practical world statesmanship from the Japanese standpoint, and I am glad to say from the standpoint of the fiery Michael also, has dealt with race. Our statesmen advocated the principle of 1 vote to every main tribe in the world, and fractional votes in due proportion to the size of the small tribes, long before your Michael entered the Senate, and every speech he has made there to strengthen that doctrine has been cheered from end to end of Japan." July 15th. Senator Joseph Bartholdi Michael is here, and has refused the conspicuous first place in the great sunset parade and drill, held in his honor, and has taken his place in the ranks with his son, and has demanded that the whole ceremony be in honor of the Star-Spangled Banner and the international flag. These flags have been put up in special size and splendor all over the town, even more than is the custom. And the borders of the parks around Camp Lincoln are one tremendous fleet of these banners. I find myself on the drill ground near the aged Japanese statesman. I am huddled on the side of the reviewing platform with the newspaper men, and we watch those strange Japanese eyes and are amazed at his fiery enthusiasm for the international flag. The reviewing platform is by the famous wrought iron gates, hammered out by the Iron Gentleman and his 3 sons and 3 daughters. Just as he named the sword the Avanel sword, knowing not of the child who is coming in 100 years, he named these the Avanel gates, for the perhaps mystical Avanel of more than 100 years ago. These gates are massive and towering, yet a little distance away are wonderfully trestled vines, seeming to be climbing the white wall from which the gates are swung. In the center of each design is a golden rain tree. The blossoms of the tree are most delicately wrought and shining with gold foil against the black. These trees were, in especial, the work of the hammers of the 3 daughters. But now, to the delight of the old Japanese, and the delight of us all, the magnificent cavalcade of men and women sweeps in from their city parade, through these ancestral gates, to the Camp Lincoln grounds in order, yet in riot, after the manner of a great dance of gay and inspired horses and horsemen and they are all within the command of Avanel, standing high in her stirrups, and as much beneath her eye and as subject to her entranced fancy as has been Saint Friend, the giver of bread, when she uttered his sermons for him, hardly knowing how she did it, except that she spoke her mind. The men on horseback are but the background of the girls in their Diana mood. The huntress, and yet the Pallas Athena, seems roused in all these girls in white. Most of them are in their first strength, high school girls, when they are still a bit tomboy. That which is with every girl for a year or half a lifetime, as a reminiscence of the primeval girlhood of her far grandmothers, when they rode the two-toed and three-toed horses in equestrian dance and revel. High above all the other flags, on gigantic poles on either side of the reviewing stand, are the official flags of the field. The poles are of equal height, and the flags are of identical size and importance in the eyes of the paraders, as they salute them, and salute the Japanese each time round the field, while the afterglow turns the air to crimson and orange and gray pearl. They go by screaming and screeching with delight, and sweep and cut the air with their Avanel blades in sunset sword drill. When they pass Avanel, whose horse is now near us, the salute and sign of submission to her pride is given with all a girl Amazon's fantastic chivalry. The Boone dagger, lifted high overhead. In her person, at least, the Boones of Springfield have put the Michaels of Springfield under their feet. And certainly the whitest thing in the whole whirlwind of white is the spirited head of old Joseph Bartholdi Michael II. Whatever the morrow between these clans, his submission is made as she sights him, and he bows and salutes in the last afterglow, and she forces him to lead the review beside her. The Japanese watches and wonders and says to the press gallery that of course no day can be Woman's Day and Men's Day equally, and this is one of the days of the women. Now all the while I have been wondering about a certain device that is in the millinery and nonsense of this drill park. The globe that is the mechanical toy of these laughing girls. Now the whole company are whirling round and round that giant school globe that looms like the dome of the Taj Mahal in the center of the field. Upon the surface of the sphere of hollow crystal, the map of the world now begins to blaze out as darkness comes on. The continents and the conventional colors of the school globes from the beginning of the log school house days. The interior of the sphere is a vapor, the color of the sea, but becoming iridescent as though the world were but a bubble blown by the fancy of one of the powers of the universe. The changes of light are painted upon the faces of the riders and the flanks of the horses. July 17th. The Japanese is addressing the leaders of the Horseshoe Brotherhood and the Amazons. He says in conclusion, "Hardly a man on the earth wanted the war to come that was waged against the world government 30 years ago, if we are to believe the professions then made. So far as I can discover, not one responsible statesman expected or intended it. Such dynamite may be touched off again, and this time it will be with more cause and more open anticipation. So though the responsible ones like Michael and my brother if I may say so, are doing their best to prevent war. Half the world is drilling and riding and marching and flying about in practice warplanes. And even here, where the great World's Fair of the University of Springfield is going on, that seems in itself an assurance of international brotherhood forever, you are drilling more zealously every day. Pardon me if for a moment I speak as an old man to his grandchildren. I ask to be forgiven if I am jealous of the furious and romantic years just coming on, jealous for the farther future and for its vindication. The immediate years, I know, will fill our cups with sorrow, whether we live or die. But I ask of you one Spartan thing, beyond fighting 10 years, if 10 years be necessary to subdue mad Singapore. Remember not only the virtues, but the follies of your mothers, the Amazons, and your fathers, the Horseshoe Brotherhood, who rode side by side and fought so nobly 30 years ago. I can speak of this because I can say without flinching that our Japanese men and women samurai went through the same glories and follies with them in the same battle line. Forever after, they have lived in that war, on that battle line. Do not go on perpetually climbing into office because you can recount military history as many of our samurais have done, drowning out the man or woman who wants to speak of matters 30 years ahead and plan such things as your fair or university. No war ushers in the perfect state. The great wars are not all fought with the sword. To speak in the Christian phrase, remember that every yesterday is but a box of costly spikenard to be broken on the feet of holy tomorrow. Though you fight 10 wars, let yesterday be your enemy. Otherwise, you fight but as the nations that died before Confucius and Mencius. July 18th. The same group as on the 14th of July are around the library table of St. Friend, with the addition of the gigantic Joseph Bartholdi Michael II, who is among us as though he were in his boyhood again, being, as he says, back home after so long. The idolizing friendship of the Japanese and his private secretary but provoke him to franker monologues, and a greater disposition to sprawl about with his hair mussed up and his head on one side like an eagle acting the robin. He has his arm around his son, as though he would push him in amongst us. As the evening progresses, in reply to some quite pointed questions from the Japanese, on behalf of his brother and himself who want to act upon the information, discreetly but definitely, Joseph Bartholdi Michael II bawls out a confession. First, let me say that no man ever held office in the world who was actually capable of running more than a village of 10,000 inhabitants. All men who have been higher in apparent rank than village mayors have simply made shift, rattled about in their big chairs as they could. The courageous man, knowing this, respects, but does not fear or revere the alleged great. They all get the respect from me due to a good mayor, and no more. No man should run for a great office without expecting to make a botch of his administration. I dream of something definite and quite selfish. I want to have my turn as president of the world government. This proclamation may be too much American style for the stomachs of my Japanese friends here present. But no one was ever elected dog catcher, coroner, governor, senator, or president in this United States who did not first nominate himself. As a matter of fact, I know of no American politician who was ever urged to run by his most admiring friend. I must keep my American political habits if I am to feel at home in this contest, and to retain even the American vote. All this is by the way. I hope it is not too mysterious to a Japanese. To continue as to my views around and about this office, a man may serve but one term at best. We Michaels are a long-lived set, and I am hoping at the end of this war to have the strength for one term. It is a long journey to the nomination, past all other possible national or international ambitions. For instance, in my case, past an ambition to forge 1,000 Michael blades. I admit I am an old man, and I know the ironies, or at least some of them, if I win. Whoever is president of the world or mayor of a small town is predestined to be overthrown by the 10 most envious and vigorous young men who want his place. And now the eagle begins to flame on the face of Michael, and he speaks most earnestly. I can only hope that some of the envious will be from Springfield's freshman chivalry. I love the hate of young men and young women, when it is high and keeps them driving forward to unseat the older generation in tournaments over noble issues. And whoever replaces me at the World Capitol, either in the legislature or the Supreme Chair, I hope to have made my bungling record there of such a sort, my foe, equally human, will be obliged to do his noblest to unseat me. But the sword of the Michaels has not been called the Avanel sword, by divine accident alone. And at the end of my turn, 10 years hence or so, I am willing to be driven out of the Supreme Chair by a Boone of Springfield, particularly if it is a girl, and particularly if she is named Avanel. Which ending is but gallant nonsense. But I venture from my dark corner to interrupt severely. The world would have a princess, not a president. It would simply be the reiteration of monarchy and idolatry from of old time. But no one seems to hear me. My voice comes from too far away. July 21st. Joseph Bartholdi Michael II is talking with the 2 Japanese and myself in Tom Strong's lunchroom, and with most elaborate and knightly deference to the extremely contrasting race character of our guests, and is giving his theory of what he calls the new Springfield race. And his tone of voice is most diplomatically ingratiating, as he touches on matters alien to Japanese thought. Just as the sea is naturally the world's buffer state, and in area far greater than the total of all the continents, with the happy circumstance that the world government is supported by a sea revenue, in this same way and no other, institutions like the University Fair lie between all great enemies and factions of Springfield, a sea of separation, cooling, and reconciliation. Springfield, in other ways, affords so great a symbol of desirable world conditions toward which the world government should be, perhaps, constructed, that I would like to put the city before you in that light. What is the ultimate citizen of Springfield? Already, the race strains that have mixed have made an elastic, resilient type. That is one of the city's suddenest moves. Of course, one event or festival pleases the Italians most. Another seems to be in the Scandinavian mood, though both events represent Springfield. Every new song or event or new idea goes echoing through the various temperaments, and has a resonance that a thought cannot have when it is echoed in only one kind of a corridor. And Springfieldians, for all their marvelous intermarriages, are not mongrel. They have a special Springfield sense of the sacred mystery of race that keeps the great pronounced race types, like the Japanese and others, in honored separation, while within one general type or kindred tradition, there is much intermarriage. We Michaelites say to each other, and you will forgive a family allusion, that the Springfield soul, which is so elastic, is like the sword evolved by the Iron Gentleman, which can be coiled like a ribbon from the side, but when cutting straight forward, can go through granite without losing edge anywhere. As for the versatility and elasticity, the Irish grandmother of my pet enemy will keep him in City Hall politics, and one Russian great-grandmother keeps him in the music department of the university as one of the leading composers. Or so we are accustomed to tracing out family lines in this town. Another man is quite sure that his Portuguese great-grandfather gives him the voice to be one of the city's principals in local opera, and his Scotch great-grandfather, at least in his own eyes, explains the fact that he is an expert accountant. The mystery of race is first of all a sex mystery, and with endless subtleties settled by instinct, on which no man can dogmatize, though they have caused jealous Othello to misunderstand and kill Desdemona, and Jessica to understand and wed Lorenzo from the beginning. If race is first of all a sex mystery, it is next a religious mystery, which is more easily expounded from the standpoint of politics, and touches perhaps more clearly our theory of world government. The prayers at our family altars differ in tone and accent. The races with a turn for sectarianism, like the Scotch, are still working in our blood, while others are the mainstay of the cathedral. All phases of the race, the religious mystery, moving in harmony, cleanness, and self-respect, are not only a part of Springfield's total personality, but of Springfield's government in the midst of apparent mob law. For instance, the fact that the Catholics have remained for these 100 years worshipping in their incense-haunted churches in the Springfield atmosphere means that Springfield people, married before Springfield's Catholic altars, have become a special kind of dreaming Catholics. Therefore, they have given us miracle-working, vision-seeking saints, like Saint Scribe of the Shrines, to help unify our mood. And we all worship in season at the cathedral, and half of us are followers of Saint Friend, the giver of bread, whatever our religious belief. I say the Christian Science Church of Springfield has a most noble history. It is made up largely of heretic Jews and proselytes from the old Congressional New Englanders, This would not be so if the doctrine were of a pure abstraction, appealing to all men equally. It is mixed in some incalculable way with the mystery of race and the mystery of the past. Or it would not appeal so definitely to these two race traditions, and so little to all others. The side of it that appeals to me is its history of freedom and its chronicle of subdivision, which mean life, at least I hold that they do in this case. And so we find the local Mother Church growing at first strong, and then new teachers rising in the body of the Church's life to make more vital the friendly and hostile pulpits of the town, and stimulate everywhere debate. The teachings of Rabbi Terence Ezekiel of the Oak Religion and Mother Gray of the Flower Religion may be largely classified as coming from the Christian Science. The wave of its tide is still strong among us, and we know not what Christian Science may bring forth for Springfield tomorrow. Our sects quarrel, of course, but whatever quarrels they have, divide families only, never the city. I wish this could always be true of the races in the world government. We have seen adorers of the truth, like close followers of Mother Gray, the florist, going from synagogue to church and from church to the open forum, and it is generally deemed a mark of a good citizen, certainly among the descendants of the Iron Gentlemen, to understand all of these movements and to love many, though they appear to contradict one another. Within the dominion of the Springfield mind, there is a principle: one sect, one vote, one race, one vote. As florist Mother Gray is willing to say to her most devoted following, our religions and races may be looked upon by the wise as many flowers of opposite design, yet all making glad the Springfield garden. Yet there is no place in the world where people are more loyal to their clans. Boones are Boones forever. You as a Japanese will be glad and comprehend when I say that even the religious life from the Far East, except the teachings of Singapore, moves in this common denominator in Springfield that we call citizenship. There are a few Mohammedan Filipinos, and I happen to know they are good citizens and good Americans, though they are allowed but one apparent wife in these states. There is a group of Tibetans, of whom the Tibetan boy is one socially, if not religiously, who do not find a contradiction between their Springfield patriotism that has gone on these 3 generations and their Reformed Buddhism. Of course, they marry for the most part among themselves, or bring Tibetans from New York or San Francisco to build up their colony. Whatever church a group of our people finds in tune with their race and sex and love tradition, no matter how separate they keep their race strains, or how guarded their family altars and holy family flags, they surely belong to the Springfield race and the Springfield civic religion. They are loyal to the city as a scholar is to his university. This is the mood I would like to get into the world government flag patriotism, which is now too crude. With obvious Singaporean exceptions, this Springfield civic religion is preached by every philosopher and every local atheist. Even Sparrow Short, though he seems to hate me and the world government, would count it as a great hardship to be banished from Springfield. as Dante counted it, to be banished from Florence. I wish this kind could see the world flag as they see the Springfield flag. You have wanted to understand my politics, to make it clearer to your brother in Japan. In most things, the city is a symbol and pattern to me of world unity and world government, and if there has been any consistency in my battles in the World Senate, it is because I had faith in this pattern. Within the range from Jew to Greek, we openly trust one another's priesthood, realizing we are all kings and priests before God. Above all races and their sects are the stars, and beneath them is the rich earth, and between these our city climbs heavenward. I am sure that before 1,000 years go by, yes, before 100 years go by, some image of Prince Siddhartha will stand beside the image of Johnny Appleseed, whose soul was so much like his own. Our image of Johnny Appleseed would have been equally impossible in the church of St. Peter and St. Paul, that stood on the site of our cathedral 100 years ago. With such practical unity of the main forces that have quarreled immemorially in the old lands, I have the hope that similar forces of race and sect, with the buffer state of the ocean between them to keep them cool, may come to practical reconciliation under the world flag, that those that can unite under the flag of Springfield with joy can someday unite the world over under the flag of all mankind. And so, till midnight, Joseph Bartholdi Michael II talks on and on, possibly recruiting a member of his possible cabinet, if his dreams come true, of being for one term the president of the world. And the Japanese samurai nods his gray head, keeping time to his eloquence, till the one remaining waiter gets us out of the restaurant by turning down the lights and handing us our hats. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17 of the Golden Book of Springfield by Vachel Lindsay. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 17. How, in the latter part of July, Black Hawk Boone is openly lynched, and James Kopinski mysteriously stabbed on the same evening. How 3 months later, there is no sign that either murder will be punished. How the Golden Book appears on the mystic day, November 1st, 2018. And how, when it comes down to the morning Avanel, she takes courage and leads her people against Singapore, that wicked nation that has declared war on the world flag. July 22nd, 2018. This morning, owing to new utterances on the part of Sparrow Short and 2 others more venomous than himself, brothers of Beau Nash, he and they are put in the international prison for world treason, with all further bail and bond refused. Therefore, tonight, there is a great torch parade and ritual by Saint Friend and his followers in the cathedral. Debs, John Brown, Lovejoy, Liebknecht are invoked. Springfield's fury, glory, and devotion are in every face and eye. Saint Friend, with unaccustomed fire for these his days of feebler health, reviles the opinions of Short and his companions, but he demands their liberation in the name of the Constitution of the United States and free speech. St. Friend cries from the pulpit, "We preach not the low revolution, but the high revolution. Not the massacre in the street, but the high, unquenched torch of freedom and free speech in the unconsumed cathedral." The smoke of those torches comes between me and St. Friend. Everything on this day happens to me in such a fashion. There is much dust on the dustless streets, at least when I pass by. And many streets are unaccountably deserted, morning and afternoon, though there is a World Fair crowd roaring somewhere near, I know. And the dust that sweeps up with the autumn leaves from these streets has the taste of old years in it, and the grave. It seems some moments as though I can keep my eyes open no longer. I am not to take one step further. Some fate has forbidden me to glimpse more of my city. But there is that in my will and soul that commands me to go forward one step further and open my eyes for one moment longer. And so, through this evening, I realize that, dimly and dizzily, the torches are being uplifted at the beginning of the star-chiming hour. Now the great Joseph Bartholdi Michael II is himself speaking in the cathedral, and if he testifies for Old Sparrow Short, who shall say that Short is a danger to the world flag? Michael says that just as freedom resides in the Declaration of Independence, in trial by jury and the like, which are immemorial, crystallized institutions of the radicalism of ancient times, so radicals with new thought should have every chance with their torch in the church, and not be forced to wave it in the street, and that he is indeed glad his meeting is being held in this place, etc., etc. July 23rd. Sparrow Short is left locked up and forgotten, for today there is a great war music in the streets. All Singapore is running amok. The Horseshoe Brotherhood and the Amazons are drilling double hours. Joseph Bartholdi Michael II is firing his clan like an Arab Mahdi, preaching a new holy war. A new group of trumpeters are to the fore, blowing slender trumpets, all of them silver white, to frighten the Lord of Cocaine, trumpets whose cry is that of birds that the Singaporeans hold accursed. The eagle, the turkey, and the wild swan. And to that music, there at Camp Lincoln, the maelstrom of cavalry goes on, round and round their gigantic mechanical toy, their simple childlike image of the earth, and its glow is turning to a glare as of a smelter furnace door, or the blaze of a little planet, newly whirled off from the sun. July 24th. War talk dies down, and the whole town is full of hatred of its leaders, and feverish, silly rumors against them. More and more openly, the small fry politicians of all factions seem to be justifying, with reminiscent emphasis, the lynching of Sirto Herdenberg as a heroic act of defiance of both the City Hall and the Board of Education. The actual responsibility for the lynching is shifted from this one to that one, but whoever it was that led, if we are to believe the tone of the coffee houses, is a hero. The fairly well-meaning leaders of the town, comprising the majority of both the Board of Education and the City Hall, are in new tremendous offices, administering the growing responsibilities of the World's Fair and the war preparations also. And a gulf has been made between them and the people, with whom they have been on gossiping terms heretofore. The old war between the town and the gown seems revived, with this difference, that the natives of Springfield act like the university students, and the finest World Fair visitors seem the real citizens of the place, insulted at the deeds of the freshmen. The habit of turning every spare village green into a summer campground for passing tourists and automobiles that has prevailed through the United States for a long time, has established in all the counties adjoining Springfield an enormous circle of village grounds. And here, the great part of the fair visitors camp by their own machines, and come into the show by day, by local transportation of all sorts. Their resentment of the frivolity of the rank and file of the city grows, and nightly they are more appalled at the rumor, as they chatter in their camps, that the Springfield mob intends to lynch wholesale the only people who have treated the fair visitors with any degree of courtesy, namely, the City Council and the Board of Education. Whole streets of the city are suddenly deserted, and the business houses closed, for this or that lightly given reason. And the next hour that street, under obscure leaders, may be filled with a howling mob that seems to be howling about nothing. The slander still persists, with infinite variations, that the man who poisoned Drugstore Smith and Coffeehouse Kasuko did it at the direct instigation of old Boone. Such an action is indeed far from Boone's nature, and this all discredited leaders, in a panic for their personal safety, steadily maintain. July 25th. I am again the Malay servant at the house of the man from Singapore. The death of Drugstore Smith and Coffeehouse Kasuko was exacted of the mayor's son by Montague Rock. It was an earnest of the sincerity of his conversion to the Singaporean cult. The man from Singapore had nothing to do with it, and in fact does not approve of the use of such a drastic initiation. But who can control these zealous proselytes, these foreigners, he says. The slandering of Boone, it appears, by the talk of the man from Singapore with his daughter, is also the work of this fanatical convert, Montague Rock. It is not exactly the Singaporean way, but again, who can control these foreigners? July 26th. About the beginning of July, 4 men come to town, who took part in the burning alive of a Negro in Chicago. The burning was provoked by a yellow journal's account, giving hearsay evidence against the Negro, disturbing their minds not at all over the subsequent vindication of the black man. His executioners come to Springfield, intoxicated with their recent leadership, the first taste of public power they have ever known, the smell of burning flesh delighting their cannibal nostrils. They take odd jobs from Boone and profess to be his violent partisans. They are more violent than he desires or uses. And so tonight, while I am chained in the body of the Malay body servant, The news comes over the phone, particularly grieving the man from Singapore, that Boone has been hanged from the same tree at the northwest corner of the State House ground, where Serto Herdenberg was hanged on the 20th of June. The 4 men from Chicago who led the mob want to burn Boone to death, but the rest of the crowd insist on a hanging. The crowd is not composed of partisans of the City Hall. There are few people who were at the murder of Herdenberg. According to the report over the phone, equally obscure members of all factions are represented. The man from Singapore says he deeply regrets the death of Boone, who is an honorable and open foe of Singapore. He almost weeps before the beautiful Mara, and as to what she thinks, I know not. He says that if he had had his way, Boone should have lived several years longer. But the fashions, even of the proselytes in Springfield, are past finding out. They are white people, you know, he says to Mara, even if they are converted. Then he has gone to his writing room in the white tower of his house, and Mara sits waiting for Crawling Jem, who is due later this evening. And here let it be recorded that the Singaporean issue becomes more bitter. The towers of Springfield and all the principal cities of the United States have been painted white this last month to drive out the more fanatical Singaporeans. In complete harmony with this hysterical and fantastic and humorous procedure, Crawling Jem has been under the necessity of wearing a small white plume in his hat, or resigning his place as president of the Robin Redbreast Flying Club. Nothing is said among the members. Plumes begin to appear, one at a time. Soon a majority have them. Jim put on his plume late yesterday. He values his supremacy in that flying club more than any victory in love or any dogma of religion. But having had a part in the Judas tricks, which have ended in the hanging of Boone, he knocks most confidently on the door tonight, when it is almost midnight, and I let him in. He carries in his hand the hat with the white plume. He walks into the book room most jauntily. There the deep-eyed Mara awaits him, with love. She is nestled among her books, just below her mother's languid picture. She lifts slow eyes that are heavy with love, but she sees that white plume, and Jim has little time left in life to have the Malay nature explained to him, the brief tale of how they may run amok without reason. Mara cannot wait. Her dagger is out, and she is indeed running amok. They reach the hall together, and she stabs him before the eyes of the green glass Buddha. She stands stark and lonely above him, and screams for her father to come down from his writing room. October 29th. The body of Crawling Jem was found in a shadow, near the tree where Boone was hanged, by the group of young Boones who came to take away the body of their kinsman. No one is in serious peril of being brought to justice for the death of Boone, though that was 3 months and 3 days ago. This has always been the case in Springfield lynchings and murders. It is a thing still taken for granted, as people look drearily in the direction of the courts. The weekly magazines in Coe's bookstore, from all over the country, roar about the 2 unavenged and unspeakable Springfield murders of the leading editor and the son of the mayor on the same night. This has been in the papers on similar occasions for a century. And curiously enough, the town is blazing with international courage, and all tense with efficiency on international issues. We are more in despair of bringing some 60 or 100 masked murderers to justice than of annihilating the whole nation and religion of Singapore on the other side of the world. And there is, I admit, some justification for our hope. America, paralyzed one minute, is like a million bolts of lightning the next. There is something of the essence of majority rule in this, if one might think it out. But to our story. Singapore is about to proclaim an all-Asiatic alliance against the world government, with the ostensible object of an ultimate Pacific Ocean government, living in alleged reciprocity and amity with the world government, but not under one jurisdiction. Their newspaper editorials, sent by cable, sound marvelously like the fulminations of South Carolina in the days of Andrew Jackson, and further fulminations in the days just before the Civil War. Indochina joins the Singaporean League, Burma, and certain provinces of southern China, and most of the Asiatic continent and all of Japan remains actively loyal to the flag of Joseph's coat. On the other hand, there are strange hesitancies in Europe and South America. There are rumors of world treason, even among American officials of the world government. Today, the Singaporean Declaration hangs. I find myself again with the Japanese and his secretary on the reviewing stand by the wrought iron gates of Camp Lincoln, as the Amazons once more whirl by. They are valiant and potent as Britomart, and the Japanese samurai says, "It is inconvenient that such creatures could let a mob run away with their town. If such things had not happened hundreds of times in history of noble cities." I find a wan new hope pouring into my dusty veins as they pass us many times strong, riding the best bred, the best shod horses in the whole wide world, and flashing the finest swords ever made. And along with the swords, the eyes of the horses flash, as though they themselves were shouting the song of the warrior maidens. It is the old song, sung now with terrible irony and sweetness. Springfield awake, Springfield aflame. And then there are strains of that world government song, beginning, "Every ship of every land, every wheel and every wing." The cheeks of the girls are sun-browned and rosy as the amaranth apples in the orchards of Hunter Kelly. The whole town is here, every faction, religion, tribe, and tongue, besides all the Michaels, Boones, and Darcys, Bonansingas, Romanoffs, Fagans, Kopinskis, Rocks, Roos, Swartzes, McGinnises, Ezekiels, Grays. There are even girls of the Negro Timmons and Emus families. There are Hymans, Stanleys, and Radleys, and all the rest. Each steed is like a pale horse of death. I am thinking that when human beings go forward like this, trained to the last inch, all whipcord and tempered steel, it is no wonder that, left far behind, to make mischief, there are human embers. This must be paid for by the discarded creatures among us who cannot stand this pace, and who are not quite vile enough in ordinary hours to be hid in jails or sanitariums, but who, when their little time arrives, go forth marauding according to their nature and their good luck. I am beneath the reviewing platform, and as I am meditating, the mayor's little sister stands up in her stirrups and cuts me across the face with her whip, not checking her pace an instant. Someone behind and above me says, "Evidently, you did not see the flags." It is the Japanese, all courtesy and solicitude. But he has been fortunate enough to see in time and to salute the meteors just ahead of this fiery little rider, the 2 battle flags of the Amazons, the Star-Spangled Banner, and the 1,000-colored flag that will yet redeem mankind, made of all the flags of the world, sewed into one glorious banner, the flag of Joseph's coat. But I have my excuse for not seeing the flags of the world. My eyes have been dazzled by Avanel, who has been mourning and hidden 3 months and 3 days. She is riding in from a boulevard to the left, hurrying with her escort to the head of the cavalcade. The meaning of her accoutrement is plain. She is saying, by what she wears, no Singapore intrigue can drive the child of Daniel Boone from her destiny. Never was she such a commander as she is in this twilight, with black horse, black gauntlets, black dress, black harness, black plume, all things black, and the only flash of white, her morning face. Her pride is laid low for a higher pride. For the first time, her black hair is combed back over her shoulders, after the manner and regulation of the Boones, and she goes forward to resume her command, and the girls cry out in passionate welcome, and there is a terrible mourning and a terrible menace in their cry, when she takes her left hand from the gauntlet, and it is dyed crimson, after the manner and regulation of the Boones. October 30th. The Amazons of the city and the Horseshoe Brotherhood have taken possession of the city, and until the day of their going, they will police the city and none shall hinder them, and they ride down the boulevards with little consideration or patience for the loitering of passers-by. More and more the Avanel blades hiss in the air, and there is angry fear in the eyes of the women, that the mobs may again own these streets, while the city's warriors are away in Asia. And this evening, the Boone Axe, of which Avanel is now the nominal editor, comes out with an editorial front page with her signature. I have railed in my time at middle-class respectability, yet the Boone Axe trusts it today as the one jewel case containing most of the gems of brotherhood. Whatever its policy in the past, the Boone Axe now puts at the head of its regular inside editorial page a picture of Confucius, and under it this description: the champion of old-fashioned middle-class decency and respectability, and the lawgiver of this paper. The picture goes there as our only vengeance for the death of the founder of this paper, and as our eternal reminder of that act. As a matter of getting down to the bedrock of civilization, we turn to the world's most ancient champion of propriety and civility and fight lynch law and all popular and ill-considered whirlwinds, until our paper has won its battle or is wiped from the face of the earth. November 1st, 2018. But Confucius is not the patron saint of the Lady Avanel. It all comes as a clouded vision before me, as though I were half in the vision, and through it beginning a new and more desperate destiny of my own. It is the snowy morning of All Saints' Day. Representatives of the Michael clan, young and old, Horseshoe Brotherhood, Amazons, and many others are at the crossing of 5th Street and Capitol Avenue by the ancestral blacksmith shop. The horse of the conquering Avanel Boone is to be shod by that good sport, Joseph Bartholdi Michael II, as a sign of fealty, and in final preparation for the going forth against Singapore. Scattered among the Michaels are the long-haired, black-haired Boones, with the locks of both the men and the women streaming back over their shoulders, after the manner and regulation of the Boones, and their left hands dyed crimson, as a perpetual reminder to themselves and all the world of certain strains of Red Indian ancestry. While the snow is blowing into the shop, white-haired Joseph Bartholdi Michael II, aided by his son the Third, have taken the old shoes from the dainty feet of the white pony. And just as the old warrior is lifting a new shoe from the fire, the flames leap up. There is a music incredibly sweet, and with a great whirring of wings and terrible thunder, the Golden Book flies out of the fire and circles above these two clans and their satellites of renown. And the swords of the Amazons are out in the air in involuntary salutation, and the face of Avanel has the consecration of a nun, taking her final vows. I wonder if all her girlish escort, so wonder-stricken, see as I see. For to me, as I feel my feet sinking into the dust of the ancient grave, this horse and rider move heavenward a little. It seems as though Avanel's horse's hoofs no longer touch the ground. She is a sort of celestial lady centaur. She and her horse have one pair of wings that bind them together. And the wings are rays of light and the same color as the wings of the book and akin. And even while I look, the very glory of this vision of a young girl, receiving her commission from the unseen world, burns me down like the last embers of a campfire, blown upon by a terrible wind from the skies. I am neither man nor weed nor flame any more, but something less than these, and doomed by the years. There is a flower of flame above her head that consumes my eyes. There are flowers of flame above the foreheads of all the girl companions. Avanel, with eyes fixed and strained, follows the flying book on her winged horse. The book settles into her arms, And though the snow and autumn leaves swirl down and blind me, I see her there, above the company, like a fairy in a trance, while the assembled clans and all the citizens gather close to hear every word. The first pages of the volume give a new constitution for the world government, based on the teachings of Abraham Lincoln. The song in the air praises Avanel, and urges her and all she commands to valor for the heavenly star-spangled banner and the heavenly international flag. But as for myself, I am sinking to my knees into yesterday. And this is not Fifth and Capitol Avenue for me, for the wind says, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Then Avanel leans down. She gives her crimson hand to me one moment. She gives me life for this war. This is the day of going forth against Singapore. End of chapter 17. Chapter 18 of the Golden Book of Springfield by Vachel Lindsay. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 18. How 7 years after the mystic year, Saint Friend and Avanel read from a copy of the Golden Book, and how he tells his vision that came the day the book first appeared. On other days, the Lady Avanel sows the thistle of dreams, and the apple amaranth seeds, and the acorns of Ezekiel, and the seeds of the golden rain tree, and thereby come new visions, and teachings, and magic works. Of the Singaporean adventure, there is a song to be sung some day, but we cannot by taking thought sing of battles. The song of battle comes when we least expect it, long after or long before the event that is so moving to the heart. But Singapore is indeed overthrown, and for 2 seasons the young men and maidens have been back from the Asiatic war front. To some of them, to many, the Golden Book came before they left Springfield. To others, it appeared after the last battle, hovering above the trenches at midnight, and there were songs in the air, calling them home. Or they found it suddenly in their hands in camp shelters, and long litanies and proclamations of the new Springfield and the new earth flashed upon their souls and burned eternal record there. It is a gorgeous 1st of March afternoon, and the wind has abated for a few hours, and a few buds are out in Washington Park, and we are hoping that the frost will not nip them in this exceedingly premature spring. The lotus pond is still empty and leaden. It flowers only in the height of July, but we look to it with hope, and with remembrance of other lotus days. Avanel and I and Saint Friend are in the Washington Park Pavilion. The precocious spring is in the blood of the ancient saint. He is the youngest of us, the gayest. Avanel is speaking of that morning in front of the blacksmith shop when the great book fluttered into her arms. In the fire flaming from the words of that book, I found power to go out and fight for the international flag, and make that the vengeance for the death of my father. Now I draw from my coat pocket a tiny duplicate of the book, such as is now in the hands of practically every Springfield citizen. printed by Josephine Wyndham and Horace Andrews. As we three loaf in the pavilion, St. Friend, Avanel, and myself, and look at the leaden lotus pond, St. Friend reads aloud the familiar opening sentences of St. Scribe of the Shrines, who wrote the book in heaven. I have been long in the jungles of the celestial Zion, speculating on how the ruined mansions here, and how the earth itself, might be rebuilt. Yet the true heaven lies in a single flower, and more of my speculations turn on how my own city, Springfield, may be rebuilt. Then St. Friend, the giver of bread, at our urging, reads on and on. The volume tells, for instance, how heaven became a jungle within the lifetime of an ordinary man. The book contains a sermon which our saint reads to us on your great-great-grandson's neighbors. It is a volume no more consecutive than the Koran. Each dream is written down once for all, as it came to the tranced soul of St. Scribe, as he bent over the page with his terrible pen in his hand. With endless reiteration, the book denounces the diabolical works of the Singaporean sect and their conspiring against world peace. It pronounces a blessing on the predestined victorious armies of the world government, and prophesizes the triumph of their splendid flag. Moreover, St. Friend reads not only many of these, but the Sermon on the Rhythm of the Heart, and the Homily upon the Good and Evil of Beauty. He reads an exhortation for the young musician who has not learned to pray, and the one for the young politician who has not learned to pray, and like discourses for many other occupations. And then Avanel and I take turns reading on and on to him, through the specific directions for the founding of the schools of the young prophets, and the discourse on the horror of the angels at all the world wars, and the tale of how the angels went out to redeem the stars from war, by surrendering themselves to crucifixion on millions of crosses, on millions of suns and stars and planets, and thus, within the lifetime of the generation now on earth, heaven was left a jungle. This is followed by an exhortation to make Springfield a city worthy of the blood of the crucified poured down upon it. But its powers are not directly in its interminable discourses. Always it seems to be a person, not a book. And so, on this afternoon, April 10th, 2025. Again, it is a goodly afternoon, and we are still hopeful for those precocious buds. As we sit in the sun in the Washington Park Pavilion, St. Friend, the giver of bread, tells us of the visions that came 7 years ago. I remember the Halloween of 2018, and the next few days, as no other period in my life. I was in the cathedral all the night, praying before the image of St. Scribe of the Shrines, and toward morning it took on the appearance of breathing human flesh, and was Hunter Kelly of long ago, in the hunter's cap and deerskin dress, such as he wore when he came to Illinois 2 centuries ago. And so Hunter Kelly, St. Scribe of the Shrines, made me forget all else, telling me stories of the tomorrow of Illinois, and giving clear prophecies of the tomorrow of the cathedral, and the city and the nation and the world. He spoke of saints of the pattern of Abraham Lincoln and Johnny Appleseed, foreordained to live and breathe beneath our cathedral roof, before the ever-living presence on the altar. Then he gave me the joy of confession, and seemed to be Saint Scribe, the master of my youth. Then all was darkness and sleep. I woke from my trance, and found myself lying on the floor of the cathedral. The image of Hunter Kelly, Saint Scribe, was gone from the niche. In the early morning, when I found myself reading his Golden Book to the people, it seemed as though I had known its every word for infinite years. I read on and on. When I closed the book and dismissed the people, they went out singing through the streets, "Springfield awake, Springfield aflame." As I stood alone in the church, a vision of the war came to me. The angel of the cathedral came down from the carved niche near the roof. By many signs she was, indeed, the angel of Illinois. The stone was transformed into a presence delicate as the milkweed silk, ruddy as the sunrise. Her hair was the hue of red corn. Her wind-blown mantle was the color of ripe wheat. Her wings were like that of the white eagle. Her eyes were dark as the deep-digged mine. Her smile was the beginning of visions. Circling her temple was an opalescent crown, 20 white stars with the 21st over the forehead, with the red blood of Hunter Kelly in the heart's core of it. Above her head appeared a great hand, swinging a censer through the roof and the walls of the building. The angel of the cathedral said to me, as she stood beside me, "This is the censer of change. A great change is coming to Illinois and the capital of Illinois." The smoke poured out and filled the streets. It penetrated every grove of Springfield. It beat in the blood of every living creature. The angel of Illinois said, "This is the incense of civic genius. The city shall be barren no longer, but bring forth." Then, through the roof, as though there was a censer higher than the first, clouds of many colors descended. These became gorgeous cloud-winged children in wonderful gleaming silks, flying through the walls. And in the same stream, Gothic grotesques walked and crawled down the aisles and out into the streets, all singing, "Springfield awake, Springfield aflame." The angel of the cathedral said, "These are the children of the new time and their playmates, the beasts of innocent fancy." Then the dusty stone cherubim and seraphim that stood by the pillars of the church with their dusty cold trumpets took on life. They blew a long awakening cry. Every note was a delicate and heart-shaking surprise. Then, from above the high altar, from a fire which burned round the host on the altar, there came soldiers of heaven in very ancient armor, but with newly pierced hands. The angel of the cathedral, the angel of Illinois, said, "These are they who shall live invisibly by every hearth and table throughout the capital." There burst from the pavement smoke and dust and stones, and from there arose the great glass image of the cocaine Buddha. Immobile as any other stone, he was yet carried by invisible hands. He and his company rushed with a great whistling, like the hissing of serpents. They went out through the walls into the streets as though the walls were nothing. They had many kinds of monsters with them, and strangely singing birds of paradise, and lions with poison quills. The angel of Illinois said to me, "This glass image will turn to dust. Yet for every angel at a hearth of the city, there will be a demon, a quilled lion, and a singing bird of paradise. These will eat invisibly at your tables and hearths, feeding upon the words and thoughts of the household. They will breathe hell's breath into the faces of the children. But the angel soldiers of heaven, who have marched from out the high altar, will be with the people also. These powers will be in perpetual truce and perpetual war in every house in the capital. But open war between nations and races of men will soon be ended forever. These lions have crept and ramped through the dark valleys of heaven, and they have the seeds of sweet flowers clinging to their feet, and these singing birds of paradise have flown through the dark trees of heaven, and have the seeds of rare trees clinging to their pinions. These censers that have swung over the raw capital will swing over many another this day, and the angel soldiers will appear in many another city around the world, and by many a far-off hearthstone and family and tribal table, with their demon foes beside them, in perpetual truce and perpetual war. May 15th. The premature precocious buds and green twigs of the year are surviving this perilous spring. There are showers and carpets of every kind of blossom. It seems more like June 15th than May 15th. Beautiful people, mothers and children, boys and girls, in the lightest and whitest of summer masquerading costumes, are walking and dancing over the whitest, cleanest streets our city has ever known. But the Lady Avanel and I confess to one another, as of old, that these days are not the millennium, however gay they may seem to be. And yet my lady this evening becomes a thing not quite of this earth, a spirit, yet a sower in earthly fields. I whisper, "Lady Avanel, Miss Fantastic," while the star chimes are ringing another new tune. What are you sowing from your close-woven willow basket, so full of seed? The lady speaks with the voice of the wind. I am sowing the torturing thistle of dreams. Some men do not see this city as it is, because they have walked in easy and stupid ways. They have never walked as we do this evening, while the thistle of dreams comes up. We see it springing from the ground in an instant. It will go on in an hour. But if we touch it, we are blessed and tormented forever by newer and newer dreams. And at last our eyes will see this city as it is, a weed patch indeed, but of fancies, and more than a weed patch of fancies, a forest, but of gigantic dreams. The men who can see the dreams build the patterns into visible forms, and then we have the Sunset Towers and the Truth Tower and the Street of Past History and the rest. Then I walk past these buildings and sow new thistledown and thistles, and they penetrate the very concrete of the sidewalk, splitting it for their roots. Then younger men and women are stung with new visions that make the Sunset Towers seem commonplace, and all but the Springfield flag, the Star-Spangled Banner, and the World Flag, dim things. The thistle of dreams is growing around Avanel as she speaks. It looks like a gigantic fleur-de-lis, but from it comes endless silk, as though from the pods of the milkweed. She says of that silk, "It is full of thorns sharper than Cupid's arrows, more transforming than any drug from Asia. They work their way into many a heart and brain. When the young citizens are tormented by these, they will build things greater than Springfield has yet looked upon. People's palaces, as yet without a name. And who are you, Lady Avanel, and by what authority do you speak?" "I am only the breath of the prairie. I am only the west-going cart. And by that authority I speak to you. And by that authority I sow the thistle." "Lady Avanel, Miss Fantastic, while the star chimes are ringing another new tune, what are you sowing from your close-woven willow basket, so full of seed?" "I am sowing the apple seeds of Johnny Appleseed and Hunter Kelly, and the acorns of Rabbi Terence Ezekiel, and the seeds of the golden rain tree of New Harmony. But they are now breathed on by the winds of chaos, and their glory comes suddenly. At once in her path appear saplings. Then they become full-grown trees, and there are many earthquakes as the boughs begin, this very midnight, to bear flowers and fruit. Then come up from the roots explosive scraps of earth and volcano coals. Treasure sacks of strange jewels, neither scorched nor smoked, are tossed to the surface of the ground. These sacks are full of coins of celestial gold, stamped with a picture of Hunter Kelly, as though he were a president or an emperor of some strange dominion. From each heap of celestial gold come 2 or 3 bright spirits with wreaths of tiny leaves or flowers round their baby foreheads, weeping angels, an hour old, little boys, most sturdy and kicking. And now angels will come to bear them to the houses of the laughing people. Citizens who are not at home will find them later on the table, and in the woodbox, and in the wastebasket. Strange little visitors and sons. Lady Avanel, Miss Fantastic, what of these children from the sod? The lady answers, "These are the laughter of earth and heaven. These children will grow in stature and beauty for 20 years. And then these little sons of God will see the daughters of men, that they are fair, as it was in the book of Genesis, at the beginning of time. The next generation of men in Springfield, born of the loves of these angels and daughters of the city, will be giants like Nimrod. These giants will drive out the former institutions with their own swords, forged for this special war. That generation will build many mansions of divine beauty, sheltering men and near angels alike. and the houses of special or heavenly aspect will mix with the plain, grimy, or earthen houses, for the generations of Springfield will be forever a mixed breed. End of chapter 18. Chapter 19 of the Golden Book of Springfield by Vachel Lindsay. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 19. How at the end of all these works and days, Avanel and I rise in a boat through the air, following the great new amaranth vine from Camp Lincoln to the parapets of heaven. How we trace its banyan-like branches through the jungles of heaven, and how we defy the handsome medicine man, Devil's Gold, and how later we find the empty sack of Johnny Appleseed. How I return to Fifth and Monroe, and Avanel is 100 years away. It is many years after the triumphant return of the Amazons and the Horseshoe Brotherhood from the battles in Asia. Avanel and I are walking again along the great Northwest Road, and we reach the old Camp Lincoln grounds where the Horseshoe Brotherhood and the Amazons so often drill. But this evening it is deserted, with neither tent nor house nor rider to be seen. It is autumn, and leaves whirl between me and the Lady Avanel, and too often hide her from me. Many leaders of various sects of the city are moving about or assembled. It has always been the holy region of the city, near the gardens of the flower religions, and the grave of Lincoln and of Hunter Kelly. Avanel and I are in the spirit on this evening. We walk as though upon the carpets of glory, and we hear from the black lips of the humble earth the cry, "Springfield awake, Springfield aflame." The old giant toy globe that used to be in the center of this field is long gone, and where it stood, there has come up, since the Golden Book appeared, a great apple amaranth vine, coming as it were like Jack's beanstalk, suddenly. It is autumn, and the whole air is fragrant with the honey of the fruit of this apple amaranth, and bees are busy with the rich fruit. Every highest, farthest bud that opens day after tomorrow, or in 1,000 years, will flash with a spark and a flame that has climbed up hundreds and thousands of miles from the roots that touch all the gardens of our city, up the old streets of heaven, where this vine blooms today. In the twinkling of an eye, while the star chimes of Springfield are ringing new tunes, from the dimmest stars of the blue, from east, west, north, and south, magic boats sweep down to the Amazonian field. It is happiness to be even the oldest of the prophets, who wait exhausted, after ages of service, praying and dreaming, stretched out on the decks of their swift boats, consumed with beautiful sorrow and hope. The honey of each different amaranth, growing through the stars, has burnt all the strength of their bodies away, yet it gives to them stronger courage, hour by hour. When it touches their lips, all else is vanity. It is the live coal from the altar, and is their new heaven. The boats are now above the field, and some of them have rested near the earth, and some of the prophets are standing round the tree. Among them is that wild ancient man, Isaiah. He gathers the whole company of Springfield people who are there on the edges of the field. Then there join, from the invisible world, many of the long-dead saints of Springfield, and many saints from other capitals of this land. Isaiah speaks to us in words such as he spoke to the Jews when the earthly Jerusalem had fallen. But they are words that shall ever be new till the last millennium is achieved. He stretches forth his hand and blesses our kneeling company, and with the honey of this new amaranth apple still burning on his lips like visible fire, he cries in a loud voice his old prophecies of the coming of the restored and redeemed Zion. Avanel and I are now in our ship above the town, looking down on the sea of dim fleets. Avanel whispers, "There are prophets in those boats from all the hermit caves, and all the shrines in the moon, and all the planets and all the suns. There are prophets that once walked the innermost streets of the far jungles of heaven. Yet the song that comes up from that sea and shakes our sails is, 'Springfield awake, Springfield aflame,' because the song and heart and blood of any prophet are for the city that will receive them." The boats are ranged in 3 great circles beneath us, round the new amaranth vine. These ride on invisible sea levels. They are not airships with modern wings and propellers, but boats of the ancient type, such as were used by Hiram, king of Tyre, when he brought the wood to build the Temple of Solomon, such as St. Peter used on Lake Galilee, such as bore St. Paul to the ends of the world. While the star chimes of the city ring new tunes, the weird sailors below us pour down a crimson wine from the sides of the boats that mixes with the autumn leaves of the amaranth vine that swirl now between us and the whole towered city below. The wind and the leaves turn to crimson mist and crimson storm, filling the city canyons with rolling rivers of storm to the top of the sunset towers. The boats rise, sailing as though traveling of their own knowledge. Even those that are empty and have no prophet sailors in them are up and away. Some of them seem like exhalations from the perfume and gleam like the gigantic vine or from the light and mist of the city below. And so out to the stars scatter all these purposeful ships, some empty, some with prophet crews, and every boat has blazing at its masthead the red and white star of Springfield and Illinois. And the song goes up with them to the stars, "Springfield awake, Springfield aflame." Avanel says, "That song comes because the song and heart and blood of the proudest prophets from the proudest sons are for the city that will receive them." We let our ship blow and drift as it will, but it sweeps up and up with the swiftness of light. In less time than it takes a flower to open, we are carried to the parapets of ancient heaven. We find our great-leaved, heavy-fruited amaranth vine, climbing up and over the closed gates and high wall towers of heaven, and winding a long way into the old forest that has overgrown the streets. We find the new, all-conquering Springfield vine, spreading branches through the forest like a banyan tree, As this amaranth from our little earthly village grows thicker, we see by its light a bit of what the ancient heaven has been. And it is still a solid place of soil and rock and metal. Where the Springfield amaranth blooms thickest, shedding luminous glory from the petals in the starlight, this heaven is shown to be an autumn forest, yet with the cedars of Lebanon, and sandalwood thickets, and the million tropic trees whose seeds have blown here from strange zones of the planets, and whose patterns are not the patterns of those of our world. Among these, vine-clad pillars and walls are still standing, roofed palaces so gigantic that when our boat glides down the great streets between them, they overhang our masts. And from branches above us, these strange manners of fruit tumble upon our decks for our feasting and delight. And there are beneath our ship, as it sails on as it will, little fields long cleared in the forest, where grows weedy, ungathered grain. Through hours and hours of the night our boat goes on, whether we will or no, through starlight and through storm clouds and through flower light. And the red star at the masthead and the sight of the proud face of Avanel keeps laughter in my bosom, and the heavenly breeze that blows on the flowers still sings to our hearts, Springfield awake, Springfield aflame. Out of the storm now, 3 great rocks appear, giving forth white light there on the far horizon, and this light burns on and on. At last our ship approaches. We see the great rocks are 3 empty thrones. These are the thrones of the Trinity, empty for these many years, just as the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies were bereft of the presence when Israel sinned. And now we are near, and see that the light that hangs round these mountain thrones is because of the vines of gigantic amaranths, of strange design and of many colors, that bloom upon them. These vines have journeyed up through the ether and great spaces from many cities and many stars. Our boat sweeps to the side of the thrones, and we look down on what was once the crystal sea, a wild green water now, with great fleets of idle boats moored by its marshy banks, the boats of dead prophets and angels who lie turned to stone on their strange and beautiful decks. These are the souls who sinned by refusing to enlist in the crusade against world wars. Or at least, so Avanel tells me from her heart. And this is all her dream, none of it mine. And without her, all this is nothing. There are boats of the older days, galleons of rotted magnificence, wrecked and high and dry upon the sandbars, and the skeletons and driftwood of boats are scattered in the marshes by long-forgotten storms and cyclones. We disembark and tread our perilous way among these strange appearances. Sometimes they are seemingly material as earth. Sometimes we are but walking on the dust of nebulae. Then we walk into the vine-clad forest that covers the pass between the nearest throne mountains, where broken steps are still to be found in the moss, and whisper to us to follow. There are many butterflies and bees that have taken too much of the blood of the fruit of the amaranth flower, and are fallen down, and some of them dead. The stair leads us up and through a dark pass and down into a deeper twilight, and the stair, slowly descending, whispers to us, "Follow." And thus we go into the most abysmal and curious of valleys, whence, perhaps ages ago, many spirits fled affrighted because of the loneliness. We walk amid rich ruins, miles and miles of vaulted halls, deep sheltered recesses, heaped with the purple dust of dead tapestries, moldering porticos shaken by the wind. Avanel, fearing not, follows the steps that still call, "Follow, follow." She is eating of the amaranth that still blooms and bears fruit, eating the fruit from many stars, breathing strange perfume, humming her old songs and new songs, with heart aflame, a dauntless prophetess, prodigal and guide. But now even her spirit is weary, and her soul has earth thoughts again, as we wander through the echoing throne rooms. She tries in vain to laugh in the desolate halls. In a fever and a fret, and in unutterable earthly weariness, we shuffle amid heaps of old shields of blackened silver, amid helmets of brass and iron, amid ivory chariots and rotted harps and broken crowns and swords of rusted gold. And then we see a campfire. We know and smell the familiar fragrance of pine wood. And in the crossing of two tremendous grass-grown streets, we find him we found first in a dream in springtime, and then at midsummer midnight at a far-off June at Fifth and Monroe. The handsome medicine man, Devil's Gold, is saying to us, as though resuming a conversation in which he had quite the best of us a moment ago, "After all, people in Springfield are ranked according to their money. People with $6,000 apiece a year are considered decent, and no questions are asked. People with $1 million in buried gold or alcohol are on a level of righteousness with the world's saints, who are, of course, admitted to their class by generous dispensation. Heaven may be a jungle, but nothing will ever alter this great law." And the handsome jester, Devil's Gold, is shaking his bead-covered rattle, making medicine and calling us by name. We are so tired from our long walk that we cannot but admire his gilded face and his yellow magic blanket, and holding each other's hands like lovers, we stoop and admire ourselves in the golden pool that flickers in the great campfire he has impudently built at the crossing of two streets in heaven. But we do not step into the pool as beforetime. Our boat is beside us. It has overtaken us like some faithful tame giant swan. And Avanel whispers, "Take us where the Golden Book was written." And thus we are up and away. The boat carries us deeper, down the valley. We find the cell of Hunter Kelly, Saint Scribe of the Shrines. Only his handiwork remains to testify of him. Upon the walls of his cell he has painted many an illumination he afterward painted on the Golden Book margins. And, in a loose pile of old torn and unbound pages, the first draft of many a familiar text is to be found. His dried paint jars are there, and his ink, and on the wall hangs the empty leather sack of Johnny Appleseed, from which came the first sowing of all the amaranths of our little city, and the amaranth that led us here. And Avanel whispers, "I ask my heart, where is Hunter Kelly? And my heart speaks to me, as though commanded, the hunter is again pioneering for our little city and the little earth. He is reborn as the humblest acolyte of the cathedral, a child that sings tonight with the star chimes, a red-cheeked boy who shoes horses at the old forge of the Iron Gentleman. Let us also return." It is 8:00 in the evening at 5th and Monroe. It is Saturday night, and the crowd is pouring toward the Majestic, and Chatterton's, and the Vaudette, and the Princess, and the Gaiety. It is a lovely starry evening in the spring. The newsboys are bawling away, and I buy an Illinois State Register. It is dated March 1st, 1920. Avanel of Springfield is 100 years away. The Register has much news of a passing nature. I am most interested in the weather report, that tomorrow will be fair. Written in Washington Park Pavilion, Springfield, Illinois. End of Chapter 19. End of the Golden Book of Springfield, by Vachel Lindsay. Recorded by Chuck Williamson, in the thoroughly unmystic year of 2018. Thank you for listening.